Does buying a private condo that is surrounded by 5 cheaper ECs actually make any sense, or is it very expensive mistake? When Tengah Garden Residences launches for preview in April, you're gonna get a lot of extreme opinions. But today, we're gonna remove all the bias, emotions, and hype for this project. We're gonna run through the VAL framework for Tengah Garden Residences, and then from there, we can see if whether paying the premium for a private property in Tengah actually make any sense. And I've recently created a new Telegram group chat. You can scan the QR code to find out more. And over the past few days, I've been getting quite a few interesting questions regarding some of the recent launches and what are my honest thoughts on it. So for this group chat, it's easier for me to share some of the up-to-date data and also my opinions about the pros and cons for each development. So looking forward to see you guys in the group chat. Alright, so now let's run through Tengah Garden Residences with the VAL framework. So for those of you that's not familiar, this is a 3-part framework. The first one we have is value, and then the second component is asset, and last but not least we have the liquidity part. So throughout this video, I'll be expanding into each component deeper, and then from there we will see whether Tengah Garden Residences actually stand out with its EC peers, or is it still the same thing. Alright, so now let's dive into the value component of the framework, and first up we have is the lease reset. So for this example, I'll be adjusting not just for the lease and also for harmonization for some of the ECs and the nearby condos that haven't been subjected to harmonization yet. Okay, so for those of you that's not familiar, what I have over here is the map of the Tengah area, and then you can see on the left hand corner we have is Tengah Garden Residences. So based on my estimates, the PSF we should be expecting is between 1009 all the way to 2002 PSF, and do bear in mind that this is a harmonized plot. So we are right beside Hongkar MRT station. And then next up we have is Kopen Grand. So for Kopen Grand, right, this is the EC. The lease left we have is about 94 years, and then after doing the lease reset, and this is not a harmonized development, okay, so after doing the lease reset we are looking at 1865 PSF. Next up we have is Lumina Grand. So Lumina Grand lease left 95 years. After the lease reset we have is also at 1865 PSF. Next up we have another EC. This is Altura. So the lease left is 95 years. After the lease reset we are looking at 1631 PSF. Quest, this is a condo development. So the lease left is 89 years. After the lease reset we are looking at 1973 PSF. And then last but not least we have Novo Place, 96 years left, and then after the lease reset is 1818 PSF. And then Auto Place, lease left 97 years, and then after doing the lease reset we are looking at 1936 PSF. So do bear in mind, for Tengah Garden, Auto Place and Novo Place, these three are the only harmonized projects when compared in this entire Tengah area. After doing the lease reset, you can kind of see that some of the ECs that was launched earlier, the range is between 1008 to 1009 range, and of course you still have Quest at almost 2000 PSF. So when we look at Tengah Garden Residences, if you manage to enter at 1009 to 2000 plus PSF range, I definitely think it's a no-brainer. If we just remove all the subsidized housing, which is the ECs, and we just compare Tengah Garden Residences versus Quest, you can kind of see that it is actually a value buy, because for Tengah Garden Residences, the proximity towards the MRT is much closer as compared to Quest. And on top of that, they're gonna be having premium views when the man-made garden is actually done. So this one, the concept is going to be quite similar to what we see at Bidadari Park. Okay, so now moving on to the next component we have is the GLS Forecast. Okay, so this bid by Guaco Land, it was awarded on 21st January 2025, and then you can see we have a break-even price of 1760 PSF PPR, and then at 10% profit margin we are looking at about 1009 PSF, 15% profit margin 2000 PSF, and then 20% profit margin is about 2001. Hence I kind of determined the upper range to be almost 2002 PSF lah, depending on the take-up rate and how aggressively Guaco Land wants to price the unit. I think if the gap is too big from the current ECs over there, then I think the units won't move so fast. Okay, so after doing the lease reset and the GLS forecast, let's take a look right at the rankings we have for the properties in Tengah area. So definitely number one here we have is Altura. In terms of the lease reset PSF, it is the most attractive expensive out of all of them, followed by Novo Place, Lumina Grand, Copen Grand, Auto Place, Le Quest, and then we have Tengah Garden Residences. I'm not denying that Tengah Garden Residences is the most expensive here because in the end, these are all subsidized housing, so definitely they're going to be getting the subsidized price. I think what's important is to actually have some case studies to see if the ECs will actually close up the gap with the new launch nearby, which is a private property, or it will actually drag down the new launch property prices. Okay, so now moving on to the next component of framework we have is the asset. So this also means the characteristics of your property, whether it does have the moat to stand out in this area or does it just blend in with the rest of the properties. So first up we have is livability. First up we have the unit mix, and then you can see over here for the first 5, right, they are the ECs, and of course ECs, majority of them are 3 bedrooms and above, so you can see a lot of them are actually scoring 100% for the 3 bedrooms and above portion. Whereas for Le Quest is a private resale, this one is 500 plus units, so we have about 53% 2 bedroom and below, and then for the 3 bedrooms and above we have about 46%. Last but not least, we have Tengah Garden Residences, so total number of units we have is about 800 plus units, and then I think we should be looking at 40 plus to 50% in terms of 2 bedrooms and below, and then for the 3 bedrooms and above should be 50% plus to 60% range. It'd be quite important to see how Guacoland actually position Tengah Garden Residences, because if based on the current private condos over there, we should be looking at this kind of ratio, so definitely it will lose out to the ECs in terms of unit mix. Okay, so the next part we'll be assessing is the layouts. For Tengah Garden Residences, the layout is not out yet, but because it's a developer Guacoland, most of the layouts I think gonna be quite similar to what we see at Faber Residence and also Springleaf Residence. So for this video, I'll just be assessing what is in the market right now for the Tengah area, and then from there, once the layout for Tengah Gardens is out, those of you that want a more detailed analysis, you can feel free to reach out to me at 8484-9302. So first up we have is Altura. So for Altura, this is a 980 square feet 3-bedder, and you can see it's quite complete. You have a kitchen, yard, household shelter, WC, and most of the living space is quite standard because it's EC ma. EC actually very efficient most of the time. In fact, they still have they managed to squeeze in a small study area in front of bedroom 2, but other than that, there is really not much wasted space, nothing to complain about. Okay, so next up we have is Le Quest. So this is the exact same size as the previous unit, 980 square feet, but one problem immediately you can see, we have 2 balconies for this unit, and in the master bedroom we have the second balcony. But other than that, if you look around the entire unit, generally there's not much wasted space. The kitchen is on the smaller side, but to make up for it, we have utility room, so this one can double up as a helper's room or even a storage room. And the good thing is that at least this one has windows, okay? Even for the utility room, you still have ventilation, but the only thing I guess is that they don't have the additional WC that most families would require in this area. And just from looking at this layout alone, for the owners at Le Quest, just a word of caution, especially in the years, I think 5-6 years down the road, once all these EC hit the MOP period, right, you're gonna have a lot of trouble exiting Le Quest, especially if this is your current layout, because the buyers over there, they'll have a lot more options, and definitely for this kind of layout, the only way to move it is only in the lower price range. People are not gonna be fighting for this kind of layout because there is plenty of much better layout options available in the Tengah market when we look at 5 to 6 years down the road. And even if you talk about Tengah Garden Residences, very likely they won't even have this kind of layout. It's gonna be more similar to what we see in the harmonized era or some of the more efficient EC layouts. Okay, so next up we have is Auto Place. So this is a harmonized project at 904 square feet. So for those of you that's not familiar, harmonization means that you're gonna be removing the AC latch in the calculation. So maybe over here you add another 5% just to account for the AC latch. So for Auto Place, it's gonna be quite efficient layout as well. Kitchen, yard, WC, household shelter, and you can see it still has quite a lot of space for the dining and the living room area. For bedroom sizes, about 8.5 square meters, master bedroom 11 square meters, and then you can still add on a small study area in between the 2 bedrooms lah. I think very likely this one could be just a storage area lah. I don't think it's realistically a study space. Okay, so next up we have is also another harmonized project. Over here we have is Novo Place. Okay, so Novo Place 883 square feet. Actually, you start to see it really start to get a bit more and more efficient once we have the harmonized layout, because if you just eyeball it, right, actually Novo Place and Auto Place in terms of layout, it's not going to be that much of a difference, but they still manage to squeeze in similar type of layout with lesser square feet, and we are already approaching the 800 plus square feet range, and still this is a lot more efficient than what we see at the 980 square feet Le Quest layout. Okay, next up we have is Lumina Grand. So this one is 980 square feet, and if you see the layout itself, generally it's going to be quite similar, and this is still the same size as Le Quest. Okay, all the 3 bedrooms got windows, bathroom also all got window, kitchen, yard, WC, household shelter, and minimal wasted space at the entrance. So definitely a very efficient layout for Lumina Grand as well. Last but not least, we have Copen Grand. So this one's at 1001 square feet, although this is slightly bigger than what we've seen so far, but overall you can see, other than the bedrooms, I think the main difference here is the dry kitchen and the wet kitchen. So significantly bigger for the wet kitchen area. You can see the countertop actually has 2 sides, and we have a yard, WC, and household shelter. Yeah, but other than that, your dining area is also slightly wider because you have the space that is shared with the dry kitchen. But other than that, actually the rest of the unit is quite standard, very similar to what we see for the other ECs as well. So based on the current layouts that we see for the ECs, and also what is expected for Tengah Garden Residences, right, I would say their layouts is going to be quite similar, not too far off from what we see from the ECs. The worst one here definitely will be Le Quest. Okay, so for the next part, we'll be discussing on the traits for each development. So first up we have is Tengah Garden. So Tengah Garden Residences, this is a private development. It is a mixed use development, and very likely we should have basement car park, and there is no childcare center for this one. And then the second one we have Le Quest. So this is also a private condo. It is actually a mixed use development, but I think some of the unit mix there, right, is not very ideal because it is not owned by one entity. They are owned by different entities, so it'll be quite different for Tengah Garden. Very likely it's going to be owned by the developer, and then they're going to lease it out to a manager to manage for them. Le Quest also doesn't have a basement car park. It is a multi-story car park, and last but not least, they have a childcare center on the 3rd story. Now for Copen Grand EC, so this is not a mixed-use development. Okay, so in short, all the ECs are not mixed-use development. Okay, so for Copen Grand, right, it has a basement car park and it also has a childcare center. Novo Place has basement car park and also childcare center. Auto Place, Lumina Grand, Ultra also has basement car park, but these 3 doesn't have any childcare center. So you already can see a very big difference, right, for Le Quest versus the 5 ECs that is on the market. That's why just now I've mentioned, right, for those owners at Le Quest, I don't think this is a good property to hold long term, because from what I see, it's definitely gonna be losing out to a lot of this EC in the resale market. I think if you are okay to hold on to this property, maybe for rental or for just own stay purpose, I think it's probably okay. But if you are looking at purely investment, right, once all these EC and Tengah Garden actually TOP, it's gonna be harder and harder for you to exit Le Quest unless you're selling at the bottom prices for this entire Tengah area. You're not gonna be fighting on the premium basis. So far, this is the first thing that kind of stands out for Tengah Garden Residences, because you will be paying a premium for the mixed-use development, whereas the other ECs all don't have this mixed-use component. Okay, so now on to the next part we have is the scale and density of each development. So for this one, we'll be looking closely on the site plan and also to see the density for the developments. Okay, so first up we have is Copen Grand. So Copen Grand, 237,000 square feet of land, 639 units, 371 square feet per unit. So generally a lot of the facilities are going to be there: tennis court, swimming pool, lap pool, water features, barbecue pit, all these things. So it will tick most of the boxes. Next up we have is Lumina Grand. So this one is at 178,000 square feet of land, 512 units, 349 square feet per unit. So also going to be quite similar to what we see at Copen Grand. A lot of the basic facilities, you will have it: swimming pool, tennis courts, barbecue pits, all this. Next up we have is Auto Place. So Auto Place, 215,000 square feet of land, 600 units, and 359 square feet per unit. But you can see a slight difference already. I think Auto Place, although it is slightly smaller than what we see at Copen Grand, in terms of landscaping, I think it's a lot more impressive just based off when you eyeball because you see you compare Copen Grand to, let's say, Auto Place, right, the water features, facilities, I think is a lot more over here as compared to Copen Grand and Lumina Grand. Okay, next up we have is Novo Place. So Novo Place, 176,000 square feet of land, 504 units, 351 square feet per unit. And then you can see this is going to be quite similar to what we see at Lumina Grand because of the limited amount of land space. So that's why what they have in terms of features definitely will lose out to Copen Grand and Auto Place a little bit. Okay, so next up we have is Tengah Garden Residences. So for this one, the land size is about 274,000 square feet, estimate units about 800, and then the density per unit is 319 square feet. Okay, so of course the site plan for this development is not out yet, but you already can see what are the other competitors having. Like for example, Copen Grand is the next biggest one. It's quite important to see how Guacoland actually designed this plot, and very likely it has to be better than what we see at Copen Grand, because if that's not the case, then I really think there's not much difference between these two developments already. And next up we have is Le Quest. So Le Quest, we are looking at 158,000 square feet of land. So Le Quest is already smaller than some of the ECs nearby, 516 units, and then the density is 307 square feet per unit. Of course the facilities mostly are still there, but it still has a multi-story car park like I mentioned just now. Last but not least, we have Altura. So Altura, this is the smallest out of all of them, 134,000 square feet of land, about 360 units, and density per unit is about 372. But if you guys can see, because of how small the land actually is, they still have the basic facilities, but as a result, in terms of landscaping, it's a bit lacking as what we see at Copen Grand, Auto Place, etc. Okay, so here we have is the artist impression for Tengah Garden Residences. Then from here we can kind of gauge how the developer actually designed the site plan. So here you can see there's going to be a couple of blocks facing the river view. Do bear in mind, although you are paying a premium for the river facing units, right, you also need to take note that most likely you'll be facing towards the MRT track expressway area, because you can see from the artist impression you already have it over there. So do bear in mind, you need to take note some of the noise also lah. If you don't like the noise and you want a safer unit, very likely you'll be in the inwards one, the pool facing ones, or you face the other side, which is currently the forested area. And this is another artist impression for the facilities from the inside. And then you can see the pools, water features, all designed very nice, and you can see it's kind of like a resort vibes. I think for Guacoland, definitely if you've seen like projects at like Springleaf Residence, they definitely know what they're doing, and I'm quite sure they can bring this concept to life. And on the first floor you can kind of see this is the retail shops lah. So that's why I think for Guacoland, they really have to do it in a way it really stands out in the entire Tengah area. Okay, so I know some of you might say, actually Tengah area, they also got new shopping mall coming up, and a lot of the developments are going to be quite near. Actually, why there's a need for mixed-use development, especially in a new town like Tengah. So over here I've already dig up all the malls that is coming up here. Okay, so first up we have is Tengah Garden Residences. So this one is a harmonized development, mixed development, so it will have its own retail component. Then the second one will be Copen Grand. Copen Grand, it has a childcare center lah. And then beside Copen Grand we have the newly opened Park Point. Okay, so this one it has a polyclinic as well. I think online you can see there's already some of the walking tours, you can go and take a look. And then the other one we have is Plantation Plaza Mall. So this one is right beside Tengah Plantation MRT. So when you think about it, right, actually Lumina Grand and Altura, they kind of have like the new shopping mall component already. It's not going to be that far off from Tengah Garden other than the distance towards MRT lah. So of course Le Quest is also a mixed development, but as I mentioned, the tenant mix is a bit complicated because it's not managed by one master developer, and it also has a childcare center. Then last but not least, we have Novo Place and Auto Place. So for these two, right, other than Novo Place with the childcare center, actually for them to get towards the shopping mall or the mixed developments, it's going to be a bit of a distance away. Their main advantage really is the MRT. So when you take a look, right, so it's kind of like combination of a few factors. Like for example, Novo Place and Auto Place, their main advantage is towards the MRT, but Lumina Grand and Altura, it will be towards the new mall area. But for Tengah Garden, it will be kind of the best of both worlds because we are right beside Hongkar MRT station, and at the same time you also have some of the mixed use development component within the condo itself already. Okay, so for the last one, we're going to be talking about location. Okay, so first up we have is Tengah Garden Residences. We have one MRT and also one primary school. The next one we have Copen Grand, 3 MRTs and 2 primary school. Next up we have Lumina Grand and Altura, both having 2 primary schools. And then the next one we have Le Quest, 1 MRT and also 3 primary schools. Novo Place and Auto Place, both having 2 MRT stations and also 4 primary schools within 1 km. So I think overall there's not too much differences between each of them because at least they are still within the MRTs. I think for Lumina Grand, Altura, you gotta be more mindful of the MRT because they are further away. But in terms of primary school, definitely there is not a development that is very lacking in terms of the schools over here. And then over here you can see this is the master plan for Tengah Garden Residences area. Like I mentioned just now, there's gonna be a couple of blocks that's facing towards the river side, and on top of that you can see other than Kranji Primary on the right side, right, actually we have other 2 more education plots that is much bigger than the primary school. So it really depends on what is the government's direction for this. As of right now, this one don't really have the announcement yet but we should be expecting 2 more schools over here. It could be secondary school, it could be post-secondary school education, we're not too sure. And on top of that, right behind Tengah Gardens, we have a plot that is zoned for healthcare, so it's gonna be quite interesting. And at the same time, you can see on the left hand side, a lot of the plot is also planned for subject to detailed planning. So definitely a lot of things coming up in this area itself. So the rankings are for the asset part of the properties, right? I would say Novo Place, Auto Place and Tengah Garden Residences definitely will be the top 3 over here, followed by Copen Grand, and the last 3 will be Lequest, Altura and also Lumina Grand. Why they are ranked this way is because I put a lot of weightage on the distance towards MRT, because Tengah area, right, the government's direction is to be making it car light, so the accessibility towards the main MRT stations I think is going to be one of the crucial factors, especially for parents if they have kids, because the kids getting around, I think a lot of them will be using the MRT. If you still need to take the bus towards MRT station, it is considered a bit far, and maybe walking within 5 minutes should still be okay. Anything more, maybe you hit the 10-minute range, it's going to be a bit far already. So that is why I came up with this ranking. Maybe you can let me know in the comment section if you agree with this ranking, but overall I think based on MRT distance, I think should be one of the strongest components when we consider Tengah area. Alright, so now we have the last part for the VAL framework. Over here we have is liquidity. So this is also related to the exit strategy and supply demand and also the quantum gap in the area. Okay, so just for reference, I'm gonna be using 1 km from Lequest because for the other ECs, the area in Tengah, there's not much resale properties there to talk about. So I'm just using this to actually have a gauge of what is happening over here in the Tengah, Bukit Batok, Bukit Gombak area. Okay, so we have a total of 2 projects within 1 km of Lequest. So it's Lequest and also the Madeira. These 2 projects for the 3 bidders we have a total of 30 past transactions. So the unit sizes, right, range from 800 plus to 2000 square feet. And then the price range is from 1.35 all the way to 2.23 million. Average is about 1.56 million. PSF range is about 1000 to 1600, almost 1007. So average PSF about 1004. So in terms of resale listings for the 3 bidder in the resale market, we have is the sizes is from 800 plus all the way to 1003. And then the price range is about 1.38 million all the way to 2 million quantum, and the average price is about 1.67 already, and these are asking prices. PSF is ranging from 1001 all the way to 1009, so average PS is about 1005. So definitely over here, I think the supply to demand ratio is very good, because for a 1 year period we have 30 transactions, and then here across 2 projects we only have 15 listings. So definitely very healthy. And if you guys have seen some of my previous videos, this one already shows a very strong supply and demand ratio here, and that is on top of the 5 ECs they had to compete with in the past 2-3 years in the Tengah area. So now let's take a closer look into Lequest. So you can see this one TOP in 2021, and over the past 1 year we have 16 past transactions, and as of right now we have 9 resale listings. So definitely there's not a lot of resale competition in the market and then you can see for the resale listings, right, the sizes range from 800 plus to 1001, and the asking price already range from 1.38 to 2 million, and the average quantum is at 1.7. So you imagine when you compare this to, let's say, Tengah Garden Residences, the gap of the TOP will be looking about 8-9 years. If you can get a nice 3 bidder at Tengah Gardens, maybe at a premium of 100 to 200k difference, then I would think definitely it makes a lot of sense because it's a development that is almost 8 to 9 years younger. And PSF here between 1005 to 1009 for asking, so the average is already 1007. If you adjust for the PSF, definitely it's going to be very close to what we see at Tengah Gardens as well. So next up we have is the Madeira. So this one TOP 2003, so definitely much older here, but we have 14 past transactions, so definitely still very healthy. And then you can see for the 6 resale listings between 1002 to 1003 square feet unit, and the price range is from 1.55 million to 1.65 million. So this one is about average 1.6 million range, and the PSF is about 1.1 to 1.2k PSF range, about 1002 PSF. So even at this older development, the average asking is about 1.6 quantum already. So for the smaller 3-bedroom compact at Tengah Gardens, I definitely think there is still some advantage to it because the Madeira is almost 27 years difference when you compare to Tengah Gardens the moment it TOPs. So for Tengah itself, there's going to be quite a few ECs that is going to TOP and also MOP a few years of each other. And does it really mean that Tengah Garden Residences will have a lot of EC competition in the future? Let's take a closer look at this timeline where I kind of estimate what is going on in the Tengah supply itself. Okay, so based on this estimated timeline, we're going to be having Copen Grand to TOP this year, probably end of this year, and followed by Altura in 2027, Lumina Grand 2028, Novo Place 2029, and 2030 we should have Auto Place and Tengah Garden Residences to TOP. So with all these estimated TOP dates, right, we can kind of work out when the projects will actually MOP. So for Copen Grand, we should be looking at 400 plus units of 3-bedders in 2031, followed by Altura 2032, we have about 180 3-bedders, Lumina Grand 2033, 306 3-bedders, Novo Place 2034 at 360 3-bedders, and Auto Place 2035 at 369 3-bedders. So all of these combined together makes up a total of, for the EC, total 3-bedroom supply 1638 units. So do you think at 1600 3-bedrooms, right, is it on the high side in terms of supply, or are we looking at the low side? So just to give you context, right, based on this newspaper article, you already can see that almost half of the planned 30,000 HDB flats in Tengah to be completed by end 2025. So what this means is that as of today, we already have about half of the HDB flats done, which is 15,000 flats. By the time maybe a few more years, 30,000 units will already have been taken up in the HDB market. So realistically, if you compare, right, if we are expecting about 30,000 HDB flats, and then for the private housing segment, usually is about 20% of the market is going to be there, right? For 1,000 plus units, maybe 2,000 plus if you include the 4 and 5 bedders, it's going to be quite okay in terms of supply, because if you just calculate about 20% of 30k, right, we should be looking at close to 6,000 units in the private market. So that is kind of the ratio that we should be expecting. But I think over here in the Tengah area, definitely this ratio is a lot lesser. I would still think the EC plus whatever that's coming out in the private market side should be able to absorb it, as long as it's in the 20% ratio versus what we have at the HDB side. Okay, so now moving on to the last part we have over here is the quantum gap between each developments. Okay, so first up, purely based on estimates, we have Tengah Garden Residences between 1009 to 2002 PSF. For the sizes, right, I'll be just using 786, 904 and 1023 square feet as a guide, because these are all the recent sizes that was done at Springleaf and also Faber Residences. Okay, so at this PSF, you can see for Tengah Garden Residences, for the smaller 3-bedrooms is between 1.5 million all the way to 1.7 million range. 904 square feet about 1.7 all the way to almost 2 million. And the bigger 3-bedders about 1.9 million all the way to 2.25 million. So this is the range that we should be working with for Tengah Garden Residences. And now looking at the other ECs for the past transactions, do bear with me because this one there's a lot of different bedrooms, even for the 3-bedrooms. So I'm just gonna run it through quickly, and for those of you that want a more detailed comparison for each of the 3-bedders, you can WhatsApp me at 8484-9302. So now let's carry on. First up we have is Novo Place. So for Novo Place, right, the sizes range from 872 square feet all the way to 947, and the range is between 1.35 million all the way to 1.7 million. Even at Novo Place, you can see there's going to be quite a significant gap versus Tengah Garden Residences. And for Altura, there hasn't been any transaction in the past 1 year. Next up we have is Copen Grand. So Copen Grand, the latest units that transacted is also 936 square feet and is between 1.5 million to almost 1.6 million range. Next up we have is Auto Place. So Auto Place is a wide range of 3 bedders, 872 square feet all the way to 958 square feet. The range is between 1.4 million all the way to 1.8 million already. And I just want to highlight, especially for Auto Place, you can see for the 947 square feet 3 bedders, right, you already hit a higher range of 1926 PSF. So definitely this is quite high for EC, especially in the Tengah area already. Next up we have is Le Quest. So for Le Quest, we have between 800 plus all the way to 1023 square feet for the 3 bedders, and the price range from 1.4 million all the way to 1.7 million. Last but not least, we have Lumina Grand. So for Lumina Grand, this is at 936 square feet all the way to 1001 square feet for the 3 bedders, 1.378 million range all the way to $1.652 million. So based on the past 1 year transactions for all the EC versus the estimated prices for Tengah Garden Residences, it does look like there's a significant price gap for the EC versus the private condo. But is this the actual price in the resale market, or simply because it's the subsidized housing as is the EC? Now I want to bring your attention to Wonder V.A.L. Okay, so this is near the Choa Chu Kang area and it is the XEC. This one TOP 2018, so it's not that far off. We are looking at about maybe 12-year gap. Okay, but the main thing here is that look at the land size, 205,000 square feet of land, so quite standard, 500 plus units, so a very decent size EC development. Okay, and you look at the sizes, right, it's between 900 plus to 1001 in terms of the recent transactions, and the lower range we have 1.3 million all the way up to 1.895 million, almost 1.9 million already. So for an 8-year-old development, we are already seeing prices, the quantum almost hit 1.9 million. And if you compare to the latest EC that's transacted, which is Auto Place, so this one is 2030 TOP, right? We already can see for Auto Place, the 3 bedrooms 958 square feet one is only at the range of 1.8 million something. So it doesn't make any sense because Auto Place is gonna TOP in 2030. So by the time Auto Place TOP, it will have a 12-year gap to Wonder V.A.L. And in terms of MRT distance, right, Auto Place is gonna be nearer towards the MRT station versus Choa Chu Kang MRT there. Okay, so to have a very similar price range for Wonder V.A.L. and Auto Place, it does look like Auto Place only has this price range because it is subsidized. Because when we hit the resale market, I definitely don't think it's going to be that cheap anymore, especially when Auto Place in 2035. Okay, because Wonder V.A.L, I do expect Wonder V.A.L to still have very healthy upward price movement, because if you see based on the volume, it does already have a lot of transactions, seeing that it is a 8-year-old EC already. So if you give it another few more years, if this price continue to move up, I won't be surprised if Auto Place can easily sell a few 100k higher than Wonder V.A.L, simply because it is going to be much newer. And just to give you guys another example, over here we have V.A.L at Tampines and Pioneer Residences. So I just want you to focus on the 3 bedders. You can see for V.A.L, right, the 800 plus square feet unit, the starting from price is almost 1.6 million already, and the PSF is about 1,008. 3 plus study is about 1.66 million, starting from PSF almost 1,008 also. But now when we compare to the Pioneer Residences 3 bedroom, right, you can see for the starting from based on the smaller size, right, towards V.A.L, the quantum gap is already 400 plus thousand. Okay, and the PSF we're looking at is about 700 PSF, 600 to 700 PSF gap. And if we look at the biggest 3 bedder, right, at Pioneer, the gap to the biggest 3 bedder at V.A.L is a whopping 800 plus to 900k. And the PSF gap is also 600 to 700 PSF gap. So when you compare this towards what we see at Tengah Garden Residences versus the surrounding EC that already launched last year or the year before, I definitely think this gap is a lot more palatable than what we see at V.A.L versus Pioneer. And another area that I think is going to be quite similar in terms of what we expect, the EC and the condo ratio there. Okay, so Canberra, I'm just using these 3 condos as example. So we have Water Gardens, so this is the blue line at the very top, followed by Brownstone and Visionaire. So these 2 are XECs at the bottom, and then you can see for the Brownstone, this one TOP in 2017, MOP 2022, whereas Visionaire TOP 2018 and MOP 2023. And last but not least, we have Water Gardens, so this one TOP this year. You can see the recent transactions already. The main thing I want to highlight here is the price gap and whether private condo can maintain its price gap or will the EC actually catch up. So you can see in 2021 to 2022, Water Gardens actually sold at a gap of about 400 plus 300 plus PSF gap in 2021, but over time I think the units remaining was getting lesser and lesser. So I think the lower floor units, they managed to sold off at 1003 PSF. But look over here, we actually have the units at Brownstone and Visionaire catching up to what we see at Water Gardens, because I think Water Gardens, the 1004 PSF units and 1003 already mostly sold off, so the remaining units actually not much left. Maybe the facing not too good, layout not too good, but the units at Brownstone and Visionaire started to play catch up. And then you start to see the transactions in 2021 from 1000 PSF start to climb up to 1002, 1003 PSF range in 2022. And then you can see, fast forward to 2026, right, the gap has still maintained about there. You can see for Visionaire and Brownstone, they increased from 1000 PSF until today's 1004, 1005 PSF range, whereas for Water Gardens from 1003, 1004 PSF, they increased to about 1007, almost 1008 PSF range. In terms of the price gap, you can see we're still maintaining like the 300 PSF gap range, but where else at the very start for Water Gardens, you have a PSF gap about 400. Okay, so looking at this example, right, Water Gardens managed to secure about 300 to 400 PSF profits, but in the same time frame, right, Brownstone and Visionaire managed to secure about 400 to 500 PSF in terms of gains. It's not really saying like Water Gardens didn't make money. They did make money, but the owners for the XEC made more money in the same period. So this is what I kind of expect for Tengah Garden Residences as well. Of course, if you manage to get into one of the 5 ECs that I mentioned just now, you're in a very good position in the Tengah area. But if you're a private owner, I also don't think that is too much of a concern, because in the end, even with this price gap, right, as long as the development does stand out in the area, you will still be able to maintain this price gap. But of course, over time, they could eventually move in together. They could eventually converge in terms of pricing. But as of right now, what we see Water Gardens after the TOP, we are looking at about a 300 PSF gap. I think in terms of liquidity, definitely for the rankings, right, all the ECs will be first, followed by Tengah Garden Residences, okay? I think that's a no-brainer, because in the end, if you are based on quantum alone, definitely the EC is going to be a lot cheaper. But of course, it will really depend on how much all these future EC owners are going to be selling at. Yeah, so this one remains a question mark. But from what we see at Canberra area and even at Tampines area, there is still that price gap that we should still observe even in Tengah itself. Okay, so based on the VAL framework, right, Tengah Garden Residences definitely lose out on almost all the aspects, because it still has the higher PSF even after the lease reset. That's due to the nature of EC being a subsidized housing. And the unit mix is also worse than all the ECs example. The main selling point for Tengah Garden Residences will be the proximity towards the MRT, mixed-use development, and also the lake views that you should expect. If I'm a HDB upgrader, definitely I will still go for the resale EC first. Unless there is a limited supply in the resale market there, then I will consider my options at Tengah Garden Residences. Unless Tengah Gardens Residences, they really made it in a way it really stands out in the area based on the site plan, based on the layouts, then I think Tengah Garden Residences will be a very strong contender in Tengah. Okay, so in conclusion, after going through all the various condo using the VAL framework, I have the rankings over here. Okay, so tying up for first place, we have is Novo Place and Auto Place, followed by Copen Grand, and then Tengah Garden Residences, and then the last two will be Altura and Lumina Grand. So why it is in these manners? Because I'm taking into account the distance towards the MRT, what is the quantum, and also some of the developments, whether it stands out in the area or not. So do you agree with this assessment? Because I think based on this, definitely Tengah Garden Residences is not the #1 development here. I think mainly because of the quantum gap. So now that we already know where Tengah Gardens kind of stands in terms of the liquidity, I think all the more it's going to be important for Guacoland to actually design a development that actually stands out in the Tengah area. For the river facing units or the park facing units, pool facing units, I think this will be even more crucial for you to help stand out in the resale market next time. And although Tengah Garden Residences I ranked it #4 based on the overall Tengah area, right, I still think it's gonna mimic what is happening in the Canberra area. So we will still see that PSF gap and quantum gap for Tengah Garden Residences versus the other Tengah ECs, similar to what we see at Canberra for the new projects versus the resale ECs over there. And this is where I come into the picture, because for Tengah Garden Residences, I think it's even more important to choose the right unit, choose the right facing, and also have a very strong walkaway price, because in this strong EC area there's going to be a lot of competition, especially when you're MOP. So all the more your unit selection and also your strategy going into this Tengah Garden Residences is very important. But of course, if you're going for own stay, I think generally it's not too much of a concern, because over a long enough time period, generally the prices here is still quite cheap when compared to the rest of Singapore. That's it for today. If you like my video so far, do feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and also you can check out my YouTube channel for other deep dive analysis that I've done for other projects as well. We should be expecting previews for Tengah Garden Residences in the second week of April. So for those of you that want to take a look or want to know your options for your development, right, you can feel free to WhatsApp me at 8484-9302, and also for the Telegram group, I put a QR code over here and also the link below. Alright, so looking forward to hear from you guys. Bye.